Hi everybody, I hope you're all doing well. I'm ready to go over the story chart for Big Red. Here we go. Alright, let's start with characters. That's the easiest. There's only really three main characters. We have Danny Pickett, his dad Ross Pickett, and Mr. Hagen, on whose property they have their cabin and they live and hunt. Alright, let's move over to setting. The story is set in the Wintopy Forest, which we've talked about before as being a made-up place. It's not a real place, but it's approximately in the eastern USA. There's lots of beech woods and pine woods, and Danny and his dad live in a small cabin there. And the time period is approximately in the 1940s. The book was written in 1945, and so that's when the setting was contemporary at that time. Alright, let's start with the exposition. The exposition is what's happening in the beginning of the story, and we see that Danny and Ross are living in this cabin, this very simple cabin. They have simple lives. They hunt and they trap and they fish. And they also help Mr. Hagen with certain things when he needs help on his property. As the story goes on, you'll see the arrows rising up to the eventual climax. But as the story goes on, the rising action includes things like Old Majesty killing Mr. Hagen's bull, Danny starting to take care of Red and training him to be a partridge hunter. They have an encounter with Old Majesty, they have an encounter with the Wolverine, and lots of other adventures along the way. Danny goes to the dog show, and Ross gets injured, and lots of other things happen. But you can just put a couple of the main events that happen from the beginning of the story up to the climax. Now the climax is where Danny and Red track and kill Old Majesty. That's a pretty exciting chapter. It's the very end of the book, and remember that Red gets injured in that encounter. As we go down to the denouement, or the falling action, this is the rising action, this is the falling action. Danny and Red go back home, and they tell Mr. Hagen and Ross about their adventure with Old Majesty and how they killed him. And Danny knows that Red is injured now and he won't be able to compete in dog shows anymore. So he desperately wants to keep old Red, Big Red, and he asks Mr. Hagen if he can buy Big Red from him. So the conclusion of the story is at the very end of the book, when Danny and Mr. Hagen work out a plan for Danny, who has no money, to purchase this very expensive dog. They make a deal, and then he sees Red's puppies, and he gets a vision of raising up other puppies in the future and becoming a dog breeder with an excellent quality dog like Red and Sheila McGuire. All right. Now, I didn't purposely write anything in the theme section or the conflict section because I want you to choose themes that you think are important to the story, and I want you to decide what conflicts are in the story. We'll talk about that. I have a chart here of major themes in literature. There are many, many more than this, but I put up a lot that would pertain to this book in particular. And also there's the list of conflicts. Now, let's do conflict first. There's man versus self, man versus society, man versus nature, and man versus God. These are the general conflicts that you see in literature. Not all of these will apply to this book. Which one of these do you think applies to Big Red? And there can be more than one. Man versus man is when a main character in the book struggles within himself to overcome certain things in himself. Man versus that's man versus self. Man versus man is when there's a conflict between two men or two groups of men. Man versus society is when the character is struggling against society in general. Man versus nature is where a character is fighting against nature, possibly a big storm or an animal, as you see in this book, like Old Majesty. And man versus God is when a character struggles against God, or sometimes in a book you may have supernatural events or things that are not of this world. So, write down in your conflict section at the bottom here what conflicts you think are in the book of Big Red. I'll leave this here just for a minute so you can look at them and think which ones you think would apply. Okay, if you want to come back to that later, you can rewind the video and pause it there and think about it some more. But now let's talk about themes. Like I said, there are many, many themes in literature. These are just a small portion of some of the many themes in literature. Love, racism, good versus evil, overcoming adversity, revenge, friendship, pride, forgiveness, survival, loyalty, betrayal, courage, and war. So look at this list and think about some of the themes that are in Big Red. There are more than one, and some people may choose a couple and other people may choose a couple of different ones. So write down the themes, write 2 or 3 themes that you think are prominent in this book. Remember, a theme is a main idea, something that is talked about a lot or shown a lot through actions and events. Okay, so if you haven't picked your themes yet, you can come back to this and look at the list again and decide which themes you think are big in Big Red. So your themes should go here and your conflicts down at the bottom. You may have more than one conflict, and you should pick several themes as well, because this book does have several themes in it. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this story, and it's time to get started on our new book, The Horse and His Boy by C.S. Lewis. And you can see the homework assignment for that on the forum. Everybody take care, and I'll see you soon.